Hi, this is Barbara Sanders with Sacred Metamorphoses, my YouTube channel, and I'm pleased today to welcome Emily Trinkaus. And you want to say your last name once for me so I don't say it wrong?
Yeah, I say Trinkus.
Trinkus. Okay, I called it differently in an earlier video I did announcing you. So Trinkus. Thank you, Emily. Appreciate it. And what I'd like to do before we get started is to drop in a little bit and take a breath with each other, and then we can go forward. It won't be very long. So if we can close our eyes and breathe together as if we're connected real close to each other, though Emily's in Colorado, I believe. And let's breathe together and imagine ourselves rooted through our bottom or our feet or some part of our bodies down into Mother Earth, way down deep into Mother Earth's core. And as we get rooted down there, I'd like us to imagine that we can also bring up her energy into our bodies through any kind of flow that you want to imagine. Sometimes it feels like a cord, sometimes it's like a rope or a thread, and sometimes it's just colors that come to me when I'm thinking about rooting into Mother Earth. And then the mycelial network right toward the surface of Mother Earth and all the roots of the trees and bushes around us. And then I'd like to have the flow of energy come up into our bodies from our root chakra all the way up, stopping at our hearts for a moment and soothing our hearts and breathing oxygen into all our cells and bones and moving up past our throat chakra, all the way up into our crown chakra, so that we are also connecting Mother Earth and out there with the stars and the moon and the sun and all the planets and asteroids and Kuiper Belt and galaxies and constellations we don't even know about. And as we're connected there, we receive also energy flowing down through us and into Mother Earth. And with that, we can open our eyes and I'll introduce what I know about Emily. Thank you for doing this, Emily. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
I just met Emily this February on a Tammy Roth retreat at St. George Island, where I often am. And Emily and Katie Todd were there as creativity and energy healing presences. It was called, I think, Astrology and Creativity. And what I know of Emily is that she was wonderful in leading us with some writing prompts and helping us dance in the mornings and all sorts of things. Thank you, Katie. Emily, sorry, my aging brain. So that's how I met you. And then the better part of that is that I started a class with you and Katie called Cosmic Container for Earthly Expansion. And that's been an 8-week program, which we're almost finished with some people throughout the nation and y'all. And it has been so expansive for me and endearing and community and connecting. I need all of those things more of the time. And I really appreciate you doing this for me
Hmm.
me, for me, and the benefit of the whole world, right? And all spiritual beings. So let me just look at my notes for a minute. I also know that your website is embodiedaquarius.com. Is that correct? And Aquarian,
Embodiedaquarian.com.
you.
Mhm.
I'll put that in the notes correctly. And that you have lots of classes and do lots of readings. And I'll just read some words that I picked up out of your website. Current cosmic events. I love that. And that we're co-creating with our astrology birth charts. We are not destined or fated by our birth charts, but we co-create with them. I love that idea. I also know that you write on Substack and people can find you there. And, I was doing some things on sacred activism and I saw on your website today the term warrior mystic. I was like, oh, that's an even better term, warrior mystic. Thank you for that. And also spiritual fire to dream a new world, natural divinity. And I know you're about to teach a 101 astrology course, which you rarely do, I hear. And anyway, that's my introduction to you. Besides, I think that you're a wonderful human being just by having met you and felt your presence and also being on this online class with you.
Hmm.
And I want Emily to tell us about herself, and then we could go wherever we want.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. And yeah, it was such a delight to get to meet you in February and to continue connecting with you online. You're such a bright, um, I don't know, fairy sprite, beautiful spirit. And I felt such a kindred connection through the dance too.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I got into astrology when I was 13. I read Linda Goodman's Sun Signs, and it just spoke to me. It woke up something in me. And so I was just pretty obsessed with astrology as a secret passion for many years. And it was during my first Saturn return. I'm now approaching my second Saturn return, but it was my first Saturn return, which happens for everyone around age 29, when I studied with my first astrology teacher in real life after having, read books on my own and secretly looked at friends' charts and that kind of thing. And that's when I first started doing readings as well. So in 1999, that's when I first started getting paid to do astrology readings and then taught my first astrology class in 2003. And it's been a good 40 years now that I've been into astrology and about 25 that I've been practicing professionally. And parallel to my astrology life. I've also led creative writing workshops. I also started doing that during my first Saturn return, writing workshops and retreats. And then I've also studied and practiced energy medicine. And I really, that was very helpful for informing my astrology practice as a healing art. Astrology is a tool that can be wielded in all kinds of ways. Some, I think, even are I want to say destructive or disempowering, not so helpful. I like to work with it as a tool for healing and expanding consciousness. And I think it's a pretty unparalleled tool for knowing who we are and uncovering our self-sabotaging behaviors and
And I think
really, yeah.
you said making sense of our reality. And I am not an astrologer. I've been taking Tammy's quantum astro course, and there's something about making sense of reality, our reality, and all sorts of other realities that really is appealing and helpful in this lifetime, I think. But go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's part of what attracted me to astrology in the first place when I first read about sun signs, which of course is just one very small part of the astrological picture, but it gave me a way of yeah, ordering my reality and also helping me to understand how fundamentally different people are. And so helping me to accept myself more and accept other people. And it's not that I'm right and they're crazy. It's like we have such different essential makeups.
Yeah.
And which is also helpful in terms of not comparing ourselves to anyone else, just really understanding that we're on our own unique journey and no two people have the same chart unless they were born in the exact same time and exact same place. So we're each one of a kind and have our own mission, and there's no reason to compare and despair, although that's easy to fall into.
We can, yes, but that helps me too because I was a psychotherapist all those years, and there's something about pathologizing behaviors and thoughts and feelings that just never worked for me. And in astrology, what I keep hearing from you and others whom I respect is it's not pathology. We are all different, and I wish the world could know that and be more accepting of everyone who's different from us. And sometimes we don't understand them, but if we look at their charts, maybe we'll have a little inkling that, okay.
Right, right.
Mhm.
So helpful.
What else do you want to say?
Um, about myself? not
about
so much.
your, or your services, your practice, what people might want to know about you in order to perhaps want to work with you, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do offer astrology readings. I now do those by recording. So people let me know where they're at, what they want to get from the reading, and then I send them a recording. And I also teach online classes, as you mentioned. I have various classes that were live, and now the replays are available about, as you mentioned, current cosmic events. So I teach astrology in two different ways. One, in terms of the what's happening in the sky right now and how to cooperate with that. And so there are plenty of people who take my classes who don't want to be astrologers. They just want to know what's going on and how can I work with the energies. And that's my approach. It's not what's going to happen. Oh, and I think we will talk about Neptune and Aries because that's the warrior mystic and this new
Mhm.
energy that we've just come into, which really relates to the theme, the kind of spiritual activist theme of your work in this podcast. But I don't make predictions about what's going to happen because making predictions presumes that the future is fixed and that there's a preordained path that we're going to take where I think it's a co-creation. There are certain energies available, and what the future looks like depends on what we're doing moment by moment and how we're working with those energies, and of course our state of attention and intention and our imagination, our incredibly powerful imagination. So I help people identify what are the energies at play and how can we best co-create with them, because
Mhm.
I don't think there's anything in astrology that's good or bad. This is part of the distortion around astrology,
Mhm.
that such and such is happening. Oh, is that good or bad? Mercury's retrograde. Oh,
Right.
that must be bad, right? It's like, no, like right now it's raining out. Good or bad? Well, it's bad if I wanted to, go out and work in my garden right now, but it's good if I want the plants to get nourished. It's just it's like the weather, it's energy. Um, so I do those kinds of classes and teaching, and then I also do teach people how to become astrologers or people who want to learn about astrology. And as you mentioned, I am offering an Astrology 101 class that will start June 26th, a 10-week class online where we really dive into the fundamentals of astrology. And right now I'm teaching an Astrology 101 class locally, and it's so exciting. I love seeing the light bulbs go off, and also it reminds me how once you learn a little bit about astrology, you realize just how much there is, just how vast and mysterious, and how many different rabbit holes you can go down. And
Mhm.
it is basically like learning a language. And
Mhm.
I think of my job as translating this symbolic language of astrology into English in a way that's meaningful and useful.
Yeah. I don't know if you know this story, but when I first joined or didn't join Tammy's quantum astro class last year, I was talking with her about it. I'm like, I am at this age, I don't want to learn a new language. That's just, I don't want to sit there and learn those glyphs and those transits and those, and and she's known me for several years now. And she was like, maybe you don't have to, let's just see what happens. Because Tammy works out in the field and we feel the energies from above and below and everywhere else. But that gave me such openness, and it's almost like fertility to take in anything I wanted, but not to get distracted by not knowing things. Like there are some people in the class who are astrologers and so smart, and I'm usually one of the smart people in the class. So when I was like, I don't know, you can learn about houses and you can learn about all the planets and all the different energies, and so. I think what happens, or at least it has for me, is that learning about some of them whets my appetite for this avenue or this channel or this direction, and then I'll go learn a lot about Venus, or I'll go learn a lot about Mars or Jupiter. And so it is an ever evolving sort of space also, and so it really does enliven me and animate my life without my having wanted to be anything about astrology. Does that make
Mm.
sense to you?
Yeah, and I love that more organic approach to learning versus the systematic or linear, right? We all have different styles of learning and at different times in our life, different ways of learning are going to work for us. And I absolutely love Tammy's work, and I'm in another quantum astrology class that she's doing, and where we just have the direct experience of planets in our chart, which is it's been incredible for me just to experience the energies directly instead of
I bet that's
analytical.
interesting for you. And we
Yeah.
do need people like you, though, to help us understand all of this. And as you say, translate into English what some of this stuff means, because I will never get to that point that I can look at a chart and know things like you can. So it's really helpful. And I want to ask one more question, though. About 13 years old, what was I doing? Getting interested in boys and riding horses. So you at 13 got involved with astrology. I think I saw that book, Star Signs, is it, in college for the first time. So 13 though, how did you get, tell me a little bit more about that story. How did you connect with it, or how did you know about it?
Well, my best friend Janice, she had a copy of it. I'm not sure where
Yeah.
it came from for her. So the two of us got obsessed about astrology.
Okay.
And I was obsessed with boys and even horses at that time too. And and astrology so fun if you have crushes, because then our game was about finding out the birthdays of the boys that we had crushes on and finding uh, uh, clever ways to do that without mentioning astrology.
That is so funny. And then she came out with the Love Signs book, I think, later.
That's right. That's right.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. And that was, I mean, that book, and again, we can, dismiss it, oh, silly, sun signs, whatever. But that was a big mainstream kind of crossover for astrology. That was like the first really popular astrology book
hmm. That's
uh,
really,
that and when I tell people that's how I first learned about astrology, so many people have said, me too. People, my
yeah.
generation, right? That book came out probably in the 70s.
That's when I was looking at it in the 70s. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then it just planted a seed. And my mom thought it was cute that I liked astrology. I mean, I'm from a totally non-woo family, East Coast, intellectual, atheist, like no. Astrology was not part of my milieu, but my mom thought it was cute. And so she would buy me Llewellyn astrology calendars every year. So I got to, look at the calendar and have my little books that I could find then. This is, of course, pre-internet. Now astrology is everywhere and anywhere, and anyone can learn astrology by getting on the screen, but then it was a whole different story. And I even, to get my first astrology chart, this was pre software and apps and internet, all of that. So I remember I sent away $5 in an envelope to the astrology place, and they sent me a chart. And that was the first time I got to look at my chart, which is probably when I was like 15.
Wow, that's amazing. I had an astrologer friend who was a massage therapist too, because of course you couldn't make money with astrology back in the maybe late 70s, early 80s. And she did my chart for me. I still have it, just hand drawn, beautiful ink. And it was just, again, a new world to me. Like, what is that? And so since then, and what Tammy had told me too, she said, well, Barbara, you're always interested in astrology. And I did every year or two get my astrology thing done and, read about it. And now it just pumps out papers that you can read every day, what it's supposed to. So anyway, I really appreciate how you've approached it. And I wonder, was it hard for you to decide this is going to be my profession?
Oh, I never made that decision. That
It,
was no, so early on I was going to be a public school English teacher.
Mm.
Thankfully, I had two good friends who went on that path ahead of me. And I watched both of them just get completely destroyed by the system. I think maybe both of them made it through their first year, but not beyond that.
Mm.
So I scrapped that intention, and then I was going to be an academic. I always wanted to teach. I always wanted to write. I have a very strong teacher archetype. So then I thought, well, I'll go to graduate school and I'll be a professor. So I started on that path. And a couple years in, I realized, no, this isn't, looking back on it, I can see that at the time I couldn't have conceptualized it in this way. But now I see how academia is just so steeped in the materialist paradigm that and again, like at the time in my 20s, I couldn't have
Mm-mm.
thought about it in this way, but I feel like that's part of what I came up against in terms of like, yeah, this isn't my place. This isn't where I need to be. I mean, I was always good at school. I always loved learning. I'm a good student, so sure, but no. And so I left graduate school leading up to my first Saturn return. I didn't know what the hell I was going to do with my life. I remember I came across this magazine on herbalism and I thought, yeah, I could go study herbalism. And so I did. I ended up living in New York City, and there was a place called the New York Open Center, which they had classes in all kinds of cool out there spiritual healing kind of stuff. And they had a 9-month herbalism program. Thought, I'm going to take that. So I became a volunteer there so I could take it for free. And I started doing it. But they also had astrology classes. And and I was like, oh my God, I can take a class? Like, ah. So I also started taking, that's when I first studied with an actual astrologer, and then just got completely obsessed with astrology and was in the right place to to go around to the bookstores in New York City to try to find the esoteric section where you might be lucky enough to find that one astrology book or two astrology books. And so that's, yeah. So I became obsessed and started doing readings for friends, just because I knew I had to practice. So even friends who didn't believe in astrology, I'm like, I don't care if you don't believe. Let me just talk to you about your chart. I just need practice.
Yes. And
And yeah, so I did that, and then they told their friends, and then I was like, oh no, now I have to charge money. Okay. So it happened very organically. And yeah.
isn't that wonderful? And I like how you just said believe in astrology or not. It's like the patriarchy, also all my conditioning, all my upraising, my training, and people around me. It's like you either believe in astrology or you don't. And that's just like, what? And that's how I grew up. And so people, when they heard I was taking an astrology class, were like, oh, you've been woo for a long time, but out there? And anyway, so I really appreciate your saying what you do because my husband's a psychoanalyst. He like me is a psychotherapist also and psychoanalyst, but he went to training for being a psychoanalyst. And people even of that culture, it's like a dinosaur of the therapies, and everybody who's not in it believes certain things about it that's just not true. I mean, I went to psychoanalysis so I could understand what it was like. It was very experiential. It was not heady. It wasn't intellectual. It was very much full body experience. And so I think astrology has that kind of rap too, or used to. Maybe it's getting more mainstream now, but it's like, oh, that's strange stuff out there. And it even maybe a little bit religious, spiritual. So we got to stay away from it if we're Christians or if we're Jews or something like that. And that's just not true whatsoever, right?
Well, it's not true that it's a belief system. It is no belief required.
No belief.
It's a language. So I can believe or not believe in Portuguese, but it still exists, right? It's still a language people are speaking.
Yeah.
So I'm speaking astrology. It's a symbolic language, and you don't have to believe in it you know, to engage with it. And actually, I have a teacher who used to say, all belief systems are BS. So no belief required. Or one of my favorite astrologers, Caroline Casey, says, believe nothing, entertain possibilities.
I like that. Thank you. So let's go around to the present time. Do you have anything you think that people in general would like to hear about what's going on in these current times, last year, this year? Because I know we talk about it in the class I'm taking with you, but I think it needs to be translated for people to
Yes.
understand these energies that are going on that help us make sense of what's going on in our country, in the world.
Yes. So yeah, and we just had a pretty epic shift just a couple days ago, which you know about because we talked about that in class, which was the planet Saturn changing signs. And Saturn spends about 2.5 to 3 years in each sign. So it's not like the biggest deal, but this one is. But Saturn, when Saturn changes signs, it tends to, or whatever sign Saturn is in, like defines an era. And Saturn in Greek is known as Chronos. So we can think about father time.
Mhm.
And Saturn tends to be quite literal. So when I first started learning about Saturn cycles and about the transits, and I went back to look at, well, let's see what happened when Saturn was in this sign, when Saturn was in that sign. It was so literal the way my life seemed to be broken up into these chunks of time that really correlated with Saturn's movement through the signs. So always a big deal when Saturn changes signs, but happens every couple of years. Okay. But this time, the sign change was from the last sign in the zodiac, Pisces, into the first sign of the zodiac, Aries. So I think about that shift from Pisces to Aries as being pretty much the most dramatic sign shift. And Saturn, whatever sign Saturn is going through, it's about, yes, what is this time about? What's our work? Saturn is the planet that has a lot to do with our dharma, our inner work, our outer work. So what's this time about in terms of how I'm meant to grow and evolve and mature? Saturn's the planet of maturation. And while Saturn was in Pisces, and so this was since March of 2023, that's when Saturn first went into Pisces. So the last couple of years of Saturn in Pisces, a lot of the growth and learning has been, I mean, certainly about endings and letting go and what do I need to dissolve, what needs to come to completion, but also really learning lessons around acceptance and forgiveness. Pisces very much relates to the serenity prayer of, the what
But
now I can't remember any of it.
I can't change. Yeah.
Exactly, right, like accepting the things I can't change, the wisdom to know the difference, but yeah, right. But this sense of a lot of the work having to do with a more spiritual, I mean, Pisces is the sign of spirituality and surrender, and there's something bigger going on here. And okay, I can't figure it out with my limited human mind, but so I have to trust and let go, let goddess, and things may have felt very mysterious and murky and watery and foggy. Okay, so then Saturn goes into Aries, the first sign, and this really changes our assignment. And this is one of the ways I like to think about astrology in terms of what's happening now. It's like there's an old idea that the astrologer way back when would get up on the ziggurat, right, the tower there to look at the stars and then report back to the king or the emperor, whoever's in charge, to say like this is what the divine is telling us. Like the planets are like these emissaries from the divine saying, here's what time it is. Yeah. So, and again, Saturn tends to be very, very literal about what's this time about. Okay. So Saturn going into Aries, the first sign, well, what kind of energy do we need? What kind of attitude, way of being do we need to start something brand new, right? With Pisces, that was what kind of attitude and energy and approach do we need to bring things to an end, right? There's not much to do. But to trust and surrender and forgive and grieve and rest. take a rest. That's part of Saturn. That was part of Saturn and Pisces too. We're at the end of the cycle. It's exhausting. I need a nap. Okay. But
You're
very different energy,
all that. I felt that.
right?
Yeah.
Very different energy to get something started and off the ground. And Aries is a fire sign, and it's what we call a cardinal fire sign. And the cardinal signs are the initiators. So we've got this initiatory fire energy. What's fire about? Fire is about enthusiasm and passion and taking action and taking risks. And Aries rules the head, and it's often about diving in head first and the kind of just do it sign. And Aries is also a sign of the self. So we're coming out of Pisces. Pisces is like there is no self. We're all one. Because at the ultimate level, at the level of consciousness, there is no me and you. We're all in the same
Mhm.
collective soup. And there were maybe some lessons to learn around that, around our oneness and unity consciousness, and how do I expand into that, and blah, blah, blah. But Aries is the self. And so Saturn in Aries really points to the power of the individual and knowing that my actions affect the whole. And actually, this comes back to that oneness consciousness, because if we're all one, then actually my state of awareness, my focus, my attention, my action, that affects everyone. That we're right. If we're not
Right.
separate, then yeah. So it's not like, oh, now it's not true. Oh, now all that Pisces stuff isn't true. It's just like, well, now we're focusing on the Aries part of this, part of the equation, which is I have agency, I have sovereignty, I have power on an individual level, and I'm going to assert it and take action and create. It's a very creative energy. And to say also that while Saturn was in Pisces, not that there wasn't creative energy available, there always is, but it was more of an emphasis on the dissolution.
Mhm.
Whereas now there's a lot of energy for the new, for bringing, new ideas into form.
Mhm.
So this Saturn in Aries, and let me give a reference point for the last time Saturn was in Aries, so people can think about, what was going on then? So the last time that Saturn transitioned from Pisces into Aries was April of 1996. And that was, for me, super personal. That was when I left graduate school, like early 1996. That's when I left and was like, ah. And then during that Saturn and Aries period, that's when I started doing astrology. That's when I started
Mm.
getting trained in energy work. That's when I started leading creative writing workshops, right? Big initiatory time. And this Saturn in Aries is a much bigger deal because another slow moving planet, a much more slowly moving planet, Neptune, recently moved into Aries. So Neptune, and here's what I think, yeah, very much relates to the spiritual activism, the warrior mystic. Neptune is the planet of spirit. It's less, when I talk about Saturn and saying that Saturn really defines these time periods, Saturn is the last of the visible planets.
Mhm.
So it is very much about our 3D reality and what manifests in this reality. Of course, they're all, as we know, multidimensionally, there's all kinds of things. But Saturn is very much about getting grounded and manifesting and bringing things into form on the earth plane. Yeah. Neptune is a planet that represents spirit, consciousness, the dream time, the astral plane, how we connect with source, pretty much everything we don't actually have words for. Neptune is the ineffable. And so it more like the mysterious and indefinable and subtle. And we know it because we feel it, but it's not about something we can analyze or make sense out of. So a more subtle energy. Neptune was in Pisces since, well, first came into Pisces in 2011, but then fully in Pisces in 2012, and just moved from Pisces to Aries on March 30th. So the idea here, when Neptune changes signs, again, that's a long time that Neptune stays in a sign, about 14 years or so. The last time Neptune was in Aries was in 1875. So none of us on the planet have actually experienced this energy until now. So, and that's of course a very big deal when a slow moving planet changes signs, and it's like, whoa, there's a whole new frequency coming in. How do we work with this? This is brand new. So with Neptune moving into Aries, there's a new way or new ways of connecting with source, and like a new definition or expression of what it means to be spiritual. So Neptune in Pisces, again, back in that Pisces energy, more about, being spiritual means being compassionate and accepting everyone, and let go, let goddess, and forgiveness, and unconditional love, and yeah, it's all good, sort of a softer, more inner expression, more surrendered expression of spirit. Again, it's not like all of that's going away. Like, let's hope that, compassion and unconditional love aren't out the door. However, Neptune in Aries is calling for, and Neptune will be in Aries. Let me say, Neptune is going to come back into Pisces for a little bit, but then we'll fully solidify in Aries early next year, and then be there till 2039. So we're just getting our feet wet in this energy. Neptune in Aries is really calling for a more dynamic, active, activist, maybe, expression of spirituality. So it's not just about sitting in the corner playing my flute and wearing my, gauzy white robes and I'm being spiritual, but there's something more passionate. And this is, you quoted something I said, which was related to Neptune Aries, about the spiritual fire, right? And really, like, I think about the scene of Jesus turning over the table of the money lenders, like, this is spirituality, right? The spirituality is taking action on our ideals and values and speaking up when something is not cool, and said, well, they're on their path and I'm just gonna forgive, everyone's doing
Right.
their thing, right?
What I heard as you were talking about Aries and Neptune and Saturn is Kali, the goddess Kali. It is no longer the soft god or goddess. It is Kali coming in. Talk about warrior mystic, warrior spirit. And many parts of Kali, at least in my oracle book, are gentle and soft and sweet too. But that's what I think about, that warrior, that not just get things done, but go for it, move, initiate it.
Yes,
Say.
yes, yes, yes,
We need
great.
that, and we need that right now. We so
And
need.
we do need that right now. And okay, so this is why it's such a big deal that Saturn has moved into Aries, because Saturn and Neptune are coming together. And these two planets, these two, slow moving planets, they only come together about 35 every 35 to 37 years. So the last time they came together was in 1989. And here, if we want to think about Saturn, in terms of the world, Saturn has a lot to do with our reality structures.
Mhm.
And this is just how reality is, right? Says Saturn. This is, well, that's how the government is, and that's how people are, and that's how the system is, and that's just how it is. That's Saturn. Neptune, among other things, is a planet of dissolution, and it's a planet of consciousness. So think about what happened in 1989 in Eastern Europe, the Berlin Wall. How Saturnian is that? That's solid. That's reality. That's not going anywhere. That's this fixed. The Berlin Wall came down. All these communist countries, communism left. It dissolved. there was a critical mass in consciousness, Neptune, that shifted the reality structures. And I lived in what was then Czechoslovakia. I moved to Czechoslovakia in early 1991. I lived there for 2 years and taught English there. So the Velvet Revolution happened there in the fall of 89. And I was there in early 1991, pretty soon after. And people there said, we never thought that communism would end. No way. That was just, we just knew this was the rest of our lives. This was just how it was going to be. It would never end. And then it ended,
So,
right?
so you're giving us hope.
Exactly. Exactly. Because what we think of as so fixed and solid and immovable, think Berlin Wall, and then Neptune comes along, and if there's enough of a shift in consciousness, those reality structures have to change. And so Saturn and Neptune, they're going to get very close this year, but then they both go back into Pisces, and then they both come back into Aries early next year. And it's, just to be Virgo about it, it's February 20th next year that they form their precise conjunction. So, and this conjunction is especially significant because it's happening at the very first degree of Aries. So that right at the beginning, they both have just moved into Aries and then they meet up. So that 0 degree of Aries, which is the first degree of Aries, but also the very first degree of the entire zodiac. So just, feel into that energetically, like that sense of anything's possible, clean slate, starting all over, massive reset. So yeah, I expect, again, I'm not, who knows what the future, right? But I think part of what the assignment is, the way I see it, is Saturn, what do we need to work at? Neptune, the imagination, consciousness, our vision for the future. That's that's our assignment, to do our own work at the level of consciousness and imagination and what's possible. Because if enough of us actually believe that it's possible to have a total shift in the world, it has to happen. We're
Yeah.
creating. We are the creators. And
Yes.
enough individuals, enough Aries individuals knowing our creative power and actually working it. And I think it's so key to utilize our imaginations in a positive way, because we're bombarded with media that hijacks our imagination to go into very negative future scenarios. And if all of us are focused on that apocalyptic techno dystopia, like those versions of the future, that's how we create it. Because that's where we're all focusing our incredibly powerful imaginations in that direction.
hmm And I have to say that no wonder you wanted to be a teacher because you're so good at it. I began taking notes, as I always did with teachers. Oh, I've got to get this down. That's how I learned, taking notes. And thank you, because one thing about you that is so beautiful is you're so animated and enthusiastic. And I'm sure that's all about your chart. But as you teach and you fill others with that enthusiastic excitement and energy to want to learn what it is you know and to
Thank you.
how you translate that and interpret it for other people. So let's put you on the Oprah list and all these other places that you need to go now talk, since you're just on this podcast, and get you out there. How can we do that?
Thank you.
How can
Thank
we do
you.
that? Get every
I like the question.
Yeah, I like the question too, because it's possible. Maybe in the shift next February.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We're going to have to stop in a few minutes. So just wondered, anything else you want to say about the current times or about yourself and all of this?
Yeah, well, what I want to say in terms of this Saturn, Neptune, Aries thing that's happening now and will be even more powerful early next year is that Aries is the sign of the self. And so I think a lot of what this, on a personal level, this is a lot about reimagining who we are and dissolving, using that Neptunian power of dissolution to dissolve these old constructs, right? And what has Saturn, Saturn in the body rules the bones and the teeth, right? The parts of ourselves that are the hardest. And, you know, for our bones to be healthy, they need to be flexible. There's actually a problem with people taking too much calcium, which actually makes your bones brittle.
Mm.
We don't want the bones to be super hard. They need to be flexible, right? So we can think about Saturn in Aries. Where have our ideas of who we are, right? Aries, the I am, our self-concept, what has become hard and rigid and defended, and well, that's just how I am and that'll never change because my parents were this and my family that, to really bring in the Neptunian imagination to imagine, well, to dissolve the parts of me that I don't really want to carry forward into my most beautiful, fulfilling future. That part of me doesn't belong there, right? So to be able to dissolve that and to reimagine what's possible for each of us in our true power and knowing ourselves as expressions of the divine. Again, Neptune has to do with our connection to source. Well, Neptune and Aries, I am source and you are source, and each and every, right, we get into trouble if I think I'm divine, I'm God, you're not, that's where we get into trouble with this. But if we recognize the divinity in each of us and just how powerful we are, and this is about us coming into our true power that happens when we're connected with our bigger selves and knowing ourselves as a conduit and expression of source.
Mhm.
So this is, yeah, just really encouraging anyone listening to really feel into that and be working with that as we're approaching February of 2026 and this massive rebirth point where there's so much possibility for each of us individually, but also for the collective, and those are not separate.
No, that's right. The personal is the political and collective. Thank you. This was very energizing to me and very hopeful. And again, you need to be spread all over the world talking about things in this way. As I said, I've used astrologers over time, but I've never heard anyone talk like you do. And I
Mm.
really appreciate that because it helps me understand. And I'm just so hopeful that things are changing. It's not like we can just wait till February and then things are all going to change around us. We have to do the work and to heal ourselves and connect with others, which I appreciate you and Katie and Tammy doing too, like collectives, circles of women, circles of people, classes, getting together to learn all of this together so that we can feel the energy of the community and the support, that we're not just crazy because we're talking about astrology right now. Right.
Right.
You,
Yes.
yes, you must have gotten very used to that over time at a party. What do you do? I'm an astrologer. Oh, and people's reaction to you is,
Yeah, I'm still working with that because a lot of times people don't know what that means, or they think they know what that means, and that's not who I am and what I'm doing.
yes,
They think it means sun signs and horoscopes.
yes, yes, and daily readings in the newspaper.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Emily. I really appreciate your being here. And if you have any last things you want to add?
I don't. And just thank you so much, Barbara. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, and and thank you so much for seeing my teacher self and
I've been with you
appreciating
on
that.
the street and now seeing your teacher self, and I will talk to you on Thursday, seeing your teacher self.
Yes, I look forward to that.
All right. Thank you so much. Sacred Metamorphoses YouTube channel. You can subscribe for free. And Emily's website is embodiedaquarian.com. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara.
Bye.